We're gonna start a shorter series, a 5-week series this morning, and it surrounds around a 4-letter word, and it's a word that's often thought of like a curse word. WORK, right? That dreaded 4-letter word, work. And it's this word that tends to drum up complex feelings in a lot of people, but it's a word that's pretty profoundly important because we spend a lot of our lives working. So let me ask you, first, how would you define the word work? What would be a simple definition, or maybe a synonym, or what comes to mind? Work. What's that? Effort? Labor? Sweat. Okay, yeah. Purpose? How you provide? Good. Anything else? It's a really broad word, right, in the English. It's a very broad word. Like, there's actually many branches of meaning off this word work. Primarily, it's in the English, like if you look it up, usually the first definition is just kind of like an activity that achieves a desired goal. I work. I do something. There's some activity. There's some task, and then it achieves a desired goal. This activity typically requires effort, and may or may not be attached to how one gains an income. Right? It may not, but it's interesting. We then refer to our employment typically as work. We use the same word. We say, I'm going to work, or I'm going to do my work. So, and the flip side of work is rest. And we'll get into that in a few weeks. Actually, Myron will be talking on that subject. But for many, this concept of work automatically brings up some feelings of stress, like some of you are burdened, like some of you are already like, it's Sunday, Randy, like I don't want to think about work. That's for many of you, that's tomorrow, and this is my day off. Or maybe you think of it as at least Sabbath in a sense, the concepts of Sabbath. Sabbath's technically Saturday. We could have that conversation, right, according to the Jewish tradition. But like maybe your rhythms of Sabbath are on a Sunday, and you're like, oh, work, you're talking about work today, you know? So work is sometimes just viewed as a grind. Sometimes it's viewed as a necessary evil. Work is something that, I do to pay my bills. Work is something that is often looked past. Like, I got to get through the week so I get to the weekend, right? So I look past my work. It's something that I just want to kind of skip over, look beyond, or, my next vacation or what have you. And you say, but is it meant to be that way? And why is it that I feel that way or tend to feel that way? Unless you're one of those people that it's like, I'm doing my dream, living the dream, and you're not saying that sarcastically, right? How you doing? I'm living the dream. Is there anything beyond work, beyond just like survival? Like for some people, it's just like, I survive. Of course, I work because I need to survive. And other people, maybe even it's a step beyond that, they're able to bring in through their work a large income, and then work becomes a way to self-gratification. So you kind of have these ends of the spectrum, but is there something beyond that? Is there something beyond surviving, and is there something beyond self-gratification? And if I spend copious amounts of time working, and I call myself a Jesus follower, am I meant to have a different vision of work? Maybe some of you think about this a lot. Maybe some of you are like, I've never even, like I come to church and then I go to work, and they're two separate worlds. So interestingly, the Hebrew word for work that's used in Genesis 2:15, and this is the first instance that God assigns humans work, He says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. That word, when you kind of extrapolate it throughout the Old Testament and look at that Hebrew word throughout the Old Testament, it has connotations of labor or cultivation, maybe it might be a better word, but also has connotations of service and is sometimes used, the same word, for worship. You're like, okay. That's interesting. Like, do I tie those concepts together? Well, Randy probably does because he's a pastor, right? I mean, like a missionary probably does, right? Like, yeah, I mean, Courtney probably does, Jimmy probably. If you run a, nonprofit or whatever. What's the first mention of work in the Bible? Anybody know? The first mention. Or guess? You can guess. Yeah. It's Genesis 2:2. And it says that God rested from all his work. So, and what's interesting there is that work is this creative activity. In Hebrew, it's actually a different word than's used in 2:15. So again, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. I got to look into some of these things myself. So the work that's used in 2:15 for human work, the work that's used for God is actually kind of a work that's often that refers to occupation or what you're doing or craftsmanship. So it's kind of this idea of the craft that God is doing. It's really interesting. But clearly in Scripture, God is the first worker. God's the first worker. And the first work that's brought up is the work that God does. So we're going to go to page 1. Is that okay? Page 1. Go ahead, open. Page 1. I'll just read the first 2 verses. And we're just going to tease this out just a little bit this morning, get our minds churning, hopefully, our souls churning. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Okay? So, for some of you, you've read that 1,000 times. For some of you, that might be new. It's like page 1. Word 1, first couple sentences. It says, in the beginning, when was that? We don't know. Okay, can I say that? We don't know. Like it doesn't seem to be the author's point. He's just like, when it started. It's almost like how you start a narrative, right? In the beginning, once upon a time. But obviously there's something being pointed to, like something is beginning. That wasn't. Something starting that wasn't there before, but yet, we know that God's there. In the beginning, God, like he's already there. And it says that he created the heavens and the earth. They probably weren't thinking of a globe, okay? You're talking thousands of years ago. This is written, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. So in the beginning, God created the heavens, the skies, okay? And the earth, the land. We automatically think of that round thing, and so he's like the skies and the land. And then it's going to take a little while to talk about how this happened and what this looked like. But what's really interesting is those first couple verses, we have a little bit of a picture of what we might call the pre-created state of things. So in the beginning, whenever that was, God's starting the narrative, the story, something's happening, he's already there. He's going to create the skies, the land. I'm going to tell you how that happened, but I'm first going to tell you a little bit about what it looked like before. So what are some of the pre-created state? What are some of the things that we got? What's going on there, pre-created state? It's dark. There's a void. Formless. Yeah, yeah. It's really this fascinating, mysterious picture. Like we get this picture, it's called formless and empty, or as Tim Mackey puts it, and he's quoting someone else, I think, where he says it's wild and waste. And formless and empty, actually, in the Hebrew, it's like a little bit of play. It's like it rhymes. I should have wrote it down. There's a rhyme to it. So, what's that? Thank you very much. And so it's wild and waste or unordered and uninhabited. There's also darkness that is covering the surface, over the surface of the deep. So you get this picture of kind of chaotic waters where there's no light that exists. And the deep seas are often a picture in the scriptures of chaos and danger because it's not the place that we tend to hang out. It's uninhabitable by humans. So we have this image, we could say, of something that's kind of a chaotic and dangerous nothingness. So you're like, oh yeah, I understand. So, but strikingly, again, who is present over this dangerous and chaotic nothingness and about to change things? Yeah, the Spirit of God is hovering. And like there's this, so again, it's God's presence, his special presence, and clearly it's going to be this creative force. He's hovering over this dangerous chaos, this void, this nothingness. So we're told after this, if you know the story a little bit, that it's here that God begins to speak and use his spoken word to bring into existence new dynamics and new environments. And again, it's really fascinating if you haven't done this. Again, he does this with his spoken word. So it's really cool to parallel this, read through the first two chapters of Genesis, and then go to the Apostle John and read the first 18 verses of his good news, his gospel. You're like, ooh, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And, he's this creative agent, and who is this? Oh, well, he put on flesh and dwelt among us. And you're like, oh, Jesus, what? So it's a really, really cool parallel, what he does there. But here we have this God bringing about new dynamics, new environments, light, sky, seas, land, in what was once chaos. And once he creates these environments, he creates creatures to inhabit these environments, with the pinnacle of this creation being his image-bearing earthlings. So we're created, it's again kind of a play on words, it's Adam, and it's like, it's very similar to the word dirt or earth. And so from the earth, he creates human, but he also animates this image bearer with what? His breath or spirit or wind, right? So he animates this image bearer made from the dirt with his breath, and it's human. So let me ask you, if you know the story as it goes a little bit, or even somewhat through the first two chapters of Genesis, what are some of the characteristics of God's work? What are some of the traits of it? What's the nature of it? It's good. Ordered. Perfect. Purpose. Has purpose. Diversity. Yep. Beauty. Dave, anything else? You're like, yeah, you're right there. You've been studying this, haven't you? It's what? Worshipful. Yeah, so allow me to accentuate 4. Several of them have been brought up. There's many more. It's just a beautiful, beautiful text. God said it was good. Yep. I'm going to accentuate 4 major characteristics. So the first, I would say that God's good work is that which brings order out of chaos. That which brings order out of chaos. So God's good work tames the mayhem, and it brings these peaceful and purposeful environments, kind of healthy boundaries and categories out of what was this disordered nothingness. So one of the stunning realities of the universe that can't be denied, whether you acknowledge there's a God or don't, whether you acknowledge that this creator God is tied to this logos in the Greek, this word that is revealed as Jesus in the beginning of John, like one of the things that cannot be denied in this place, this material world that we live, is the profound complexity and the high functioning order. Like, it just can't be denied. It's astounding. It's marvelous. From the smallest little atom, right, to the grandest galaxy. Like, there's this profound complexity and high-functioning order. Like, you people that are walking around, like, we are absolutely walking miracles, right? I mean, scientists still haven't explored all the complexity and order of the human body. It's stunning. God brings forth light that penetrates the darkness, and then he orders this distinction between the light and the darkness, and he calls it day and night, and you see God creating boundaries of time within space. He separates the water above from the water below, and we have this space called sky. And then he from the chaotic waters, he creates dry ground, and he calls it land, and he separates the land from the seas. And so what you see God doing here is he's establishing these foundational structures of order. And they're going to have purpose and meaning, but the purpose and meaning they're going to have is that it's going to allow the creatures and the inhabitants of these spaces to thrive. Okay? So, secondly, the order that God's good work brings is not dull. It's not straight-lined. It's not boring. It's not static. It's not sterile. It's not cold. It's not colorless. So on the contrary, God's good work bursts forth with beauty, okay, and artistry from the dark void. So again, it's really interesting. You move on to chapter 3, and we'll be getting into that next week, but you move on to chapter 3, and Eve comes to this tree, and there's fruit. And in chapter 3, verse 6, it says that Eve saw this fruit of this tree, and that it was good for food, and what? Pleasing to the eye. So now again, if you know the story, and this is where sometimes we get in a danger zone because we have heard the story so many times. If you know the story, bing, a flag goes up, warning, bad, 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 something bad's about to happen. But wait a minute. Were these dynamics bad at this point? Not at all. Not at all. So God made this fruit, and he made it useful, but he also made it what? He made it beautiful. He made it beautiful. God's creation is full of astounding uniqueness and diversity and wonder and movement and exquisiteness and power and elegance and color and shapes and patterns. Like, isn't it part of the joy living around here? Like, oh my goodness. Like, it's like God paints the sky every night and the hills, and we went to the ocean a week ago, and these waves that have such power and grandeur, and a sunrise, a sunset, a wildflower, a lion, a mountain, an ocean, a tree, a star, a bird, people. I mean, this is one of the remarkable signposts of a creator God. First, the world is profoundly complex and ordered. But secondly, it's magnificently beautiful. Why did God bother to make it beautiful? I mean, it could just be functional. Like, that'd be pretty important. Like, thanks, God, we can live in this place. Why did he make it beautiful? What's that? It pleased him to do so? Yeah. Yeah, I think for one, it's like God can't make anything that's not beautiful because he is beautiful, right? He is beautiful. He's magnificent. He's glorious. So if he's got a canvas, what it has to do is reflect him. It has to reflect. So when you look around, now again, you can go to some weird places, but when you look around and see the beauty and the grandeur and like you're seeing these little signposts of like that God is so beautiful. But what's also interesting is that it's speaking aspects of his beauty, right? It's speaking, it's pronouncing. And so real famous verses in Psalm 19, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard, right? It's everywhere. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. So you say, who is this majestic, beautiful creation speaking to? Like, are the chipmunks out there? Like, oh. You know? Just imagining that, like some night sky, and so beautiful. Do the hummingbirds go, I'm so pretty? Do they have an awareness of like, that's my best hummingbird? like, do they have an awareness of their own beauty? I don't know. Those are good questions, but who is it speaking to? Who's it speaking to? Us. It's speaking to us. It's speaking to his image bearers. Isn't that cool? Creation is beautiful because God is beautiful, and it speaks to us of God's beauty and majesty and glory. I think it's a sad irony that so many Christians have neglected the arts. I think it's a sad irony that so many Christians classify the arts as the quintessential slippery slope to godlessness. Or that it's so often left, beauty is so often left on the cutting room floor, right? To make room for stark pragmatism. God is the ultimate artist. God is the ultimate musician. I mean, have you ever heard the song of a wood thrush? God is the creator of beauty. I believe as Christians, we should be encouraging the arts. We should be encouraging painting and sculpture and photography and film and writing and poetry and storytelling and drama and architecture and design and music of instruments and voice and dance. You're like, well, brother, you can abuse those things. Seriously, that's where I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, that's the point. We'll get into that next week. You can abuse it all, but can it all echo the beauty and glory of God? Yes. Come on. Thirdly, God's good work creates and reproduces and sustains life. It brings a constant harvest of goodness that feeds and propagates and ultimately benefits the rest of creation, right? So just a little example of this. You see this in verses 11 and 12 of chapter 1. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation. So notice what he's pinpointing here, this seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed, right? That's bearing seed. They're going to reproduce according to their kinds, and trees that bear fruit with a seed in it according to their kinds. So if all the order and the structures and the environments that God made, he makes them so they sustain and propagate and advance life and growth and well-being, right? Time and space where we're hinged in the galaxy at just the right angle and spinning at just the right, like all of this, the land and the sea and the air we breathe and seed-bearing plants and beauty that we behold, it's like all for our benefit. It's all for our good. It's all for that which sustains and propagates and brings beauty to life. Again, Tim Mackey says that the God's good work of creation was an others-focused activity. It's an others-focused activity. God is not being selfish and self-serving. I mean, he's revealing his glory, bringing about his glory, and he wants to share that, but he's not creating something that he needs to sustain him. Right? He's the great I am. He's the always existing self-sustaining one. Instead, his work brings life and sustains life and benefits life for others. Oh, fourthly, we're getting there, folks. We're getting there. So overlapping all this is this idea of benefiting others. God's work is of the best quality. It's good. It's intrinsically good. It's good. It's inherently good in its nature. So, and then what's really interesting, God's like, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then after God makes humankind, he says it's very good. It's exceedingly good. To put it more bluntly, we say like I've heard people say, God don't create no junk. I know there's a double negative there. So, but it's like, yeah, God doesn't create junk. The quality of everything God creates is intrinsically good, and humanity, God's image bearers, are exceedingly good because of the different aspects that they reflect their Creator. So let me just encourage you, don't ever qualify it as any less. Don't ever qualify yourself as any less. Oh, wait a minute, aren't we depraved? All right, again, we're going to get into this. We can do things that are not good. And we definitely do things that are not good. But that does not mean that what God made is anything but what? Good. So God's good work brings order, it brings beauty, it brings benefit, it's of the highest quality. You say, man, what a beautiful vision of work. So let's just bring this home to think about real quick what this means for us. Genesis 2 retells the creation narrative with this heavy emphasis on God's creation and purpose for his image-bearing humans, man and woman. So again, we get this first mention of work for humanity, Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And again, this work, like I said, is also used for service and worship, cultivation. So what can we infer? Last question I'll ask you. What can we infer from the story of God's work and his intent for human work? Okay. It's for others, yep. Good. Yeah, I think that there's this, we can infer, and I know you guys are all getting at this, right? That we're assigned with mirroring God in our work as his image bearers. That there's a profoundly godly goodness to bringing order out of chaos and to bring beauty out of nothingness and to create environments that are safe and life-giving and sustaining and beneficial to others, seeking that the quality of it is intrinsically good as God defines good. Right? We're called to partner with God and replicate his good work. So within this framework, God tells humans, man and woman, that they're to be fruitful and increase in number, that they're to fill the earth and subdue it. Okay, I don't think this is just about making babies, because the rest of the creation does that pretty naturally, right? So bunnies make babies, and right? So, but this is specifically talking to humans, right? Fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the creatures and the vegetation. And some people are like, oh, has God given us like a license to exploit it? And okay, again, we're going to get into that, the broken aspects of it. But at this point, when we're living according to the rhythms of God's good work, it's anything but exploitation. It's overseeing and investing and cultivating and nurturing and in such a way that takes what's bounding with potential and shepherds it and serves it and brings forth its fullest potential. And it benefits others, right? There's a wild orange tree, and you're like, oh, it's cool. I'm getting some fruit, but it's got seeds in it, and you plant it, and you make an orchard, and all of a sudden, wow, now we've got a whole orchard. That's more than I can even eat, and yeah, so now I'm going to serve other people with that too. Oh, how cool! It benefits others. So as we set the table for this series on work, we can ask ourselves, does my work, that which I put my hands and my mind to, where I look to be productive, whether it's employment or not, it's okay, it doesn't have to be, does it replicate God's good work? Does it bring peaceful order and safety and out of things that are kind of chaotic? And does it display beauty? Oh, is that really? Well, I mean, yeah, it was a big part of God's beautiful and displays his glory. Does it help sustain and benefit life? Is it of high quality? And this is precisely where, and I'm wrapping up. I'm kind of digging this, I'm sorry, but I'm wrapping up here. This is precisely where some of you are tempted to qualify your endeavors as inferior to others. And a young mother might think, well, I spend all my energy picking up after my 2-year-old all day. And clearly that's not as important as the woman that's, alleviating poverty on the other side of the globe. Or someone who's stocking shelves is like, oh my goodness, I'm here at the grocery store doing this meaningless work. And surely that's not as important as the guy who's writing that great book that's reaching hundreds of thousands and encouraging people. And allow me to suggest to you that rather than devaluing what we often qualify as mundane, that God's vision of good work should elevate all work that brings any good, that brings any order, that brings any beauty, that benefits another. Does that make sense? Yeah. Remember, the original good work that God assigned man and woman just as like work a garden. And then he seemed to trust that a larger work would eventually have this beneficial outgrowth from that seemingly smaller work. And too often I think we miss that doing great things often has much less to do with quantity as it does the quality of what God has entrusted me and just put right in front of me today.